and daring. Take the wheel of a high-powered machine. Press its performance past its design. Recognize, then all but ignore the dangers. Fight, win races, then championships. Then meet the best from all forms of the craft. Matched in equal cars in the three-part series that is the International Race of Champions. A pinnacle meeting of 12 of the best in racing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Flashback to the Track. And it's a very special episode because we're talking about the IROC. Merry Christmas to all of us. We're talking about the IROC. James, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic from the country that created Christmas, I guess. I don't know. Or commercialized the crap out of it.
Israel? Like,
wherever we are in this world. Now, yeah, it's a holiday season. It doesn't feel like the holidays, though. It's kind of weird.
It doesn't here either, man. Like, I live in the Great White North, and it's a balmy, like, 6 degrees Celsius outside, and all the snow's melted off. I'm going to go running outdoors tomorrow because it's supposed to be, like, 8 degrees. So,
well,
that's, that's the equivalent of, like, your American, like, 60, 62?
Yeah, so that's about us right now, actually. Today was quite a nice day. There's a good bit of humidity outside, so it didn't really feel like a chilly 60. It felt like a nice warm 60. But, you know, something I used to do during the holiday season was I would turn on ESPN Classic, and they would have rerun after rerun after rerun of the International Races of Champions, like nonstop. I don't know if you ever got to experience Classic, Mark, but they had some pretty good classic NASCAR and just stock car racing content. Because, I mean, back in the day, ESPN was like, oh, yeah, we'll take that piece of content, we'll take this piece of content, and that piece of content, we'll just air it.
Yeah, I've not seen, I didn't really have access to ESPN Classic growing up. Like, I first started seeing IROC on the Speed Channel, like 04, 05, 06, when it was broadcast live. So that's kind of like the first time I ever saw IROC. But just like, even the last couple of years, just going on YouTube, I've really been enjoying just watching old IROC because it's just really interesting racing and just seeing the different driver lineups are what I really find kind of interesting about IROC. And I think not a lot of people are super familiar with IROC. I think they know the idea of it. So IROC obviously stands for International Race of Champions. And it was basically a series, you know, where all these champions from different kinds of racing would come together to find out who was the ultimate champion of motor racing.
Yeah, it's not about some Chevrolet Camaro. If it wasn't for this series, that Camaro probably wouldn't exist. And all you mullet wearing, American loving people out there wouldn't be enjoying it as much.
I don't know if I would get an IROC though. I'd probably go like for an El Camino if I was going to get one, you know?
No, you know, that's very mullet wearing and I love it, but I love the Buick Regal. That's probably my favorite muscle car from the day. I mean, at that point in time, it was faster than a Ferrari. It technically was the fastest car on the world, in the world at one point. So it's kind of funny.
Well, let's go into some background about IROC. So essentially, there's not much to talk about in the race because race only 30 laps. So we'll give you a nice history of IROC based on what we found on Wikipedia. And it was launched in 73, 74. And they ran a Porsche 911 RSR 3.0, the air-cooled Porsche 911 RSR. And that first season, Mark Donohue won the championship. The late, great Mark Donohue, one of the greatest racing drivers of all time. So kind of super fitting that he was the first IROC champion. And the way IROC works is that all the cars would be provided by the series, and they were completely set up exactly the same. They were same engine, same body, same setup. They were fielded by a neutral crew that did everything, put the tires on it, and the drivers got very little input other than being able to adjust the brake bias. That was the only thing they were allowed to adjust. And they always rotated the cars, so you never got the same car twice. You always got a different car at each race, but the season was usually only 4 races, and sometimes it was only 3 races.
So, like, the first season, like Mark said, was split. It was like a 74-75 season that they, like, split in half. Was 73, then 74. So, in the first few events, they were all held at Riverside, and it was exhibition-based with these Porsches. Then they went to Daytona, and they ran with the Porsches again. And the fields were pretty stacked. I mean, you had guys like Mark Donohue, Peter Revens, Bobby Unser, David Pearson, and AJ Foyt. Those were a few of the names at Daytona. And of course, at Riverside, you had quite a list of who's in motorsports there. I mean, you had Richard Petty, of course, Emerson Fittipaldi, Gordon Johncock was there. And then, you add that to the stacked field already there. I mean, it was like a mix. You had USAC, SCCA, Formula One, and NASCAR drivers all competing against each other on the same track, and probably one of the coolest cars in racing history.
And I just want to say about Richard Petty, that first year, like, sleeper road course driver, man. Not a lot of people remember him for that, but he's like one of the best road course drivers in NASCAR history. Just look at his stats. But the cool thing about IROC is that all the cars were painted, well, back in the day, in super bright colors.
Mm-hmm.
And each car was like a different color, and the colors changed at each race. So like it wasn't just Dale Earnhardt in a black car all the time. And the numbers changed.
Mm-hmm.
So your number was where you were in points.
Yep.
So like if you were first in points at the second race, you got car number 1. And so on and so forth. Now, in 2004, when Crown Royal took over, drivers kept their normal number from their respective racing series and had a color associated with them. So, like, Matt Kenseth was number 17, and his car was yellow because his NASCAR was yellow.
Yeah.
So they did that. But back in the day, they're just like, all right, Dale, you're driving the bright pink number 12 this week, and they got no say in that. So that was kind of cool to see the like super bright colored cars so you could tell them apart.
Yeah, and I think that's what was really cool too. Like they're different, they're bright and they're vibrant, and you don't really always see that in every form of motorsports. Like every now and then you have a flashy team with a bright color car or something, but no, this was the consistent thing of IROC. Getting the cream car, getting the baby blue car, getting the deep blue car, getting the purple car, the pink car, the red car. It was just even more cooler to associate. What's your favorite car? Oh, that red one. That one's cool. I like them. Let's go and see how that driver does. And I think another good point to point out too, fun fact about the numbers, when Dale Earnhardt passed away, they actually retired the number 3 from IROC. So Elio Castroneves, who did run the number 3 in IndyCar, had to run number 03 when he ran in IROC.
Yeah, and I think that's just to honor, Dale Earnhardt.
Honor Dale Earnhardt.
He's got the most IROC championships of anybody, right? 4, I think.
Actually, I think Mark Martin passed him, or might have tied.
I think they're tied. I think it's 4 each.
Mark Martin does have
Mark Martin was never a champion of anything, so that's really funny. But he was a champion of champions.
Exactly, he was the champion of champions. I mean, he did win championships in ASA, so I mean that's. Wait, did he win an ASA championship? He might have. That's where his background is, but I'm not 100% sure on that one. I'll have to double check that with like someone giving me the information about Mark Martin. But yeah, Mark Martin was probably one of the most successful IROC drivers in history, along with Dale Earnhardt. I mean, they were just buddy and always just having a great time running these cars. And of course, Dale Earnhardt was great friends with Mr. Dave Marcus, who was a test driver for IROC. He would help test the cars, develop them, and set them up every weekend to make sure that they were as equal as possible and there was as much parity between them.
And we're joking about the way they selected the drivers. So like drivers were kind of like from NASCAR, IndyCar, F1, road racing, IMSA, Trans Am, and they just like and also like guys that were just winners of big races. So like if you won the Indy 500 last year, you usually get invited to IROC this year. But the criteria got like looser and looser kind of as the years went on. Like I think there was one season where we had like Ryan Newman, Kurt Busch, Matt Kenseth, like a whole bunch of Kevin Harvick, a bunch of NASCAR drivers. And I'm like, sure, why not, right? Like they're not current champions, but yeah, sure, let's throw them all in there. And it was just kind of the way that it ended up being because certain guys couldn't race in it because of certain criteria, or they couldn't make the schedule work because it kind of followed the NASCAR circuit around in later years, so it's tough. But the other cool thing about it is like they used a bunch of different cars.
Yeah, the car selection was fire. Obviously, we've mentioned the Porsche Carrera 911 RSR that they did run initially. The second season saw Chevy Camaros. And those were pretty interesting to see. And then it developed to Chevrolet saying, well, if we're going to have our car be the manufacturer face of this series, why not develop a car for this series? Hence the Camaro IROC Z. That's right. That bad boy was a fire car. I don't care who you are. You have to break your neck every time you see that on the streets. But I thought the race car was probably the coolest thing. Later on, Dodge got the contract to be the manufacturer for the series. So first they developed the Dodge Daytona to be the IROC car, which is where we come into play in 1990. Eventually, later on, they would develop the Dodge Avenger to be the IROC car, which was kind of groundbreaking at the time because the cars before that were very boxy. They weren't as sleek as what the Avenger would be. It was a very rounded car, very smooth, very aerodynamic. And then finally, the final manufacturer to ever step into IROC was Pontiac with their Trans Am. And that's probably the most iconic car we all know of because that was the car we saw from the mid 90s to the end of IROC in the mid 2000s. And Mark, dude, I love the Trans Am back when they had the multicolors. I didn't like it too much when they had, their special Crown Royal paint schemes going on, but when they had like variety of color palettes for those things, it's probably my favorite looking car ever.
I have to agree. I love it. It's absolutely beautiful. And the thing being with like these cars, like it's essentially stock cars, right? So they're basically like almost kind of like modern TC cars in a way, kind of like what they remind me of, but they're very much like stock cars. So yeah, the NASCAR guys just dominated. Like they just won everything. It was mostly on ovals too. Like I think from 92 until 2005, it was only ovals. So no IMSA guy was going to come in and like win an IROC race at Texas, So it was tough. So all the NASCAR guys would just dominate. The last guy to win the championship who wasn't a NASCAR guy was Al Unser Jr. in 1988.
And that's back when they would go to Mid Ohio and like, really cool circuits and road courses. Man, those were good times.
Yeah, so the NASCAR guys would kill everybody, and like we said, they would usually run as companions in NASCAR races or sometimes IndyCar races, and the winner got paid. So in 1990, you got $175,000 to win the title, and starting in 2004, when Crown Royal took over, you got $1 million if you won the title, and then like everybody else would get money too, but it was like not as much, obviously.
No, because you're not a winner, and winners get paid. The fastest gets paid, and the fastest gets laid. And that's what the point of IROC was. But also something cool, Mark, there were some pretty interesting sponsors or title sponsors in IROC throughout the years. I mean,
yeah, like True Value, that was interesting.
Oh yeah. I mean, how would I have ever learned about such a great hardware store if it wasn't for IROC? How about Budweiser, man? Budweiser was on the cars in the mid 80s as well as a title sponsor. And we've mentioned it, Crown Royal. Man, that's it's Canadian whiskey, right?
Yes, it is, sir. That is a wonderful rye whiskey. I once asked for a rye and Coke when I was in the greater Orlando area, and the server looked at me like I was insane. Like, what the hell is rye? And I was like, Canadian whiskey. She's like, oh, you have to say Canadian whiskey. I was like, oh, okay. Well, we call it rye whiskey at home, and American whiskey is bourbon, but whatever,
And was she swept off your feet because she was like, oh, you're not from America? Oh,
no,
you're
she wasn't.
A foreigner. Oh, well, her loss.
I know.
Anyways, so all good things have to come to an end, and unfortunately, IROC came to an end. In 2006, the series could not find a title sponsor and withdrew their events for the season, saying that they would be back in 2007. But unfortunately, they were not back in 2007. They announced that they were going to instead sell off their assets and call the series quits, which was a shame because the series was at the time struggling, even though it did have a great title sponsor with Crown Royal and newer venues it was going to and a chance to more or less align itself with NASCAR. It just kind of all fell apart. And when you don't have a manufacturer to be behind you to give you money to showcase their car, or a title sponsor to want to pay in a lot of money, there's really no way to keep the lights on and the people employed. So that's kind of the sad ending of IROC. Mark, you remember when IROC ended? How did you feel about that at the time?
I was really disappointed because in 2006, I thought they were going to a really interesting place. Like they went to the Daytona road course, which I thought was really cool in the summer. So they were adding some more interesting circuits. They wanted to bring more road courses back, and I think they were talking about maybe doing like 2 road courses and 2 ovals. in the future. And in 2006, they let Max Angelelli and Wayne Taylor share a car because in Grand Am, you were co-drivers. You shared a car, and they won the championship together. So the two of them shared a car. They each ran 2 races each, which I thought was super cool. Like why not, right? Like, why not let them share a car? Because it's just more realistic of what their championship is like. So that was cool. I thought IROC was going to a really cool place. And, it's just really unfortunate that they ended up, where they were, not really working out. And here we are today with no IROC.
Yep, no more IROC. Though there is ROC, which is Race of Champions, and it's an interesting dynamic and platform of showcasing the best of the best in all forms of motorsports through different motorsports disciplines and variety of vehicles. And normally it's been scheduled at a decent time of the year where everyone throughout the world of motorsports kind of has like a off time or some kind of downtime to where they can compete. I know Jeff Gordon has competed, Jimmy Johnson, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, just to name a few of the NASCAR drivers in recent years who have been able to grace them. Brian Vickers as well too, with his Red Bull connection. I think he was also able to go over there too, but it's not the same. It's not a schedule or a season of like 4 races. And seeing, to me, what was always cool was Daytona, seeing like some of the best drivers in the world learn how to draft and handle the high banks and compete against these NASCAR guys that are always doing it. And it's just like another race for them in speed during speed weeks. That was awesome to me. And I think, if we could bring IROC back, which I know a lot of people would love to see, I would love to see just like a Daytona event where we can have just everybody like go balls out and show that they're the best, like the House of Dale. But it's not probably going to come back ever. It's going to be a piece of time that we should just remember of something that was just really great and interesting. But big thing fans got to remember, IROC isn't NASCAR and NASCAR isn't IROC. They're 2 totally separate things, even though IROC got stock car-y.
Yeah, NASCAR can't just bring IROC back, which seems to be what all the tweets a while ago were about. Like, NASCAR needs to bring IROC back. I'm like, well, here's the thing. NASCAR doesn't own IROC, so it's not really a thing. The IndyCar series needs to bring the IRL back. Well, no, guys, think before you say things. So, yeah, just do some research. But yeah, so we won't get into that. But yeah, it's too bad we don't have IROC anymore. Like James is talking about international race of champions or sorry, the Race of Champions, which is kind of cool. I feel like the only way you could make IROC work now is if it was all in one weekend.
Yeah,
if
just
it was
like that is.
Everything all you'd have to do it in December so you could get all the F1 guys. If you wanted it to be truly international, you'd have to have one NASCAR guy, one IndyCar guy, an F1 guy, somebody from supercars, a guy from the World Endurance Championship, an IMSA guy. You'd have to do it, from all these different walks of life, and there'd have to be all at one multi-purpose track where you could do a road course on an autocross, a dirt race. There'd have to be a dirt race in there. Mm-hmm. You'd have to be able to do a wet race as well. You'd have to have something wet where they could manufacture the rain, so they could wet the track and make them race in the wet, which would be interesting. So you'd have to do it at Charlotte or at Daytona. Daytona would be perfect because you could do a full oval race. You could do the road course. Mm-hmm. You could do a short course. You could do a dirt. You could do a rally even and just have 6 or 7 events in one weekend. But then it's basically just Race of Champions. So.
Yeah, but I don't think Race of Champions has a dope oval to run on. So I do agree with you there. If we can just condense it down to either one race weekend or my idea of just doing Daytona oval, I think would be great. Either or, even Charlotte too, because all drivers throughout many disciplines have spoken about wanting to do NASCAR or compete in NASCAR. But just like they're competing in their division, it takes a lot of their full attention to compete the way they do at the level that they are able to. You just can't walk into the garage area and be like, all right, I'm going to jump in this car and I'm going to be the fastest thing on the track, because you're racing against people who have focused their entire lives on driving stock cars. So that's where it's hard to have new people come into NASCAR, where if you had these guys like say, hey, and gals, hey, one race, or one event, you can get to, drive a stock car in these conditions and stuff. I'm pretty sure everyone would say yes. You would even have like Lewis Hamilton saying, hell yeah, I want to do it. The problem is Mercedes might be a little apprehensive about letting him go and run a stock car race at Daytona, where they could lose, possibly lose their, franchise driver for the season if he gets hurt, so understandable.
I don't think we're ever going to see it happen. So it's
No.
unfortunate, but what are you going to do? But going in depth kind of on the 1990 IROC season, it was only 3 races, but we'll go over kind of the driver roster so like what the lineup of the drivers is. So we've got quite a lot of NASCAR guys. We've got 5 NASCAR guys: Dale Earnhardt, Terry Labonte, Mark Martin, Rusty Wallace, and Darrell Waltrip are your 5 NASCAR guys.
Yay, Jaws.
And then you have 3 guys from IndyCar. You have Danny Sullivan, Emerson Fittipaldi, who's IndyCar / F1 because he's also a 2-time F1 champion.
Yeah.
And then Bobby Rahal, whose mustache is just incredible.
Oh, yeah.
You got Jeff Brabham from IMSA, Dorsey Schrader from Trans Am, because back then, man, Trans Am was like super popular. Now it's like nobody even knows it exists. And then Martin Brundle, who I guess is there because he's the Le Mans champion. He was like between Formula One rides at this point. He had like a couple weird years where he wasn't in Formula One. But he won Le Mans in 1990, so I guess like that got him his invite. So he's there as your lone kind of like outlier weird dude.
Yeah, he is truly the international guy because yes, Emerson Fittipaldi is an international man. He's mainly just running IndyCar at this point in his life. So yeah, it's IndyCar. I think they went to Australia back then, didn't they? Or was that mainly just?
They went to Brazil and stuff too. I think like they actually did a few races like internationally. I believe I might be wrong on that. But...
Yeah, I think you like you said just like a handful, like 1 or 2, but yeah. So the schedule for 1990 consisted of 3 races, and the reason why was because there was a little bit of a delay in developing this new car. The 1990, the Dodge Daytona was launched to be the new car of IROC, and to make this their new car, they basically had to cut all the old bodies from the IROC Zs off their chassis and develop a Daytona chassis. Or excuse me, a Daytona body for these chassis, and it took a bit of time. So unfortunately, they had to skip Daytona, but they still went to Talladega, Cleveland, and Michigan. Fun times in Cleveland today.
Yeah, Cleveland rocks.
So Dale Earnhardt won the opener at Talladega. Shocker. Al Unser Jr. finished second. Another shocker. I feel like normally on the super speedway, it was always Dale Earnhardt, then Little Al. Especially throughout the 90s. And a storyline coming into this event, previously at the last NASCAR Cup race at Daytona, Darrell Waltrip was injured in a practice accident and unfortunately would have to miss the second event of the IROC season in Cleveland.
So this is one of the rare times you're going to have 11 drivers in a race instead of 12.
Shocker. But it's okay. It's okay, people. Still quality race. Let's move into the broadcast because, with every race comes a broadcast. And this one is on ABC. Of course, it's a tape delayed event, but that doesn't make it any less of an exciting event. But they basically edited it down to an hour for, the airing window of being an hour. And it was probably on something similar to Wide World of Sports. But it's just ABC coverage. And ABC covered a lot of IROC races basically since the inception of the series.
And in the booth, we have the great Paul Page and Bobby Unser. Uncle Bobby is up there doing his craziness, trying not to swear. And, he's just a crazy fun guy, Mr. Bobby Unser, Indy 500 champion. And on pit road, we have the one and only Jackaroo.
The man of IROC in the pits, Jackaroo. He'll get you the know-how you need all throughout the race.
He's a one-man show covering the pits in an 11-car field where there are no pit stops. He's absolutely just getting her done.
And he's got the dopest last name, too. Aroot. I mean, like, you just like to say it. It's not as cool as Dr. Jerry Punch.
It's all one word. It's Jackaroot.
Yeah. Aroot. Jackaroot. Oh, that's funny. So some pre-race notes. The starting lineup is determined by points, as mentioned before, and they're inverted. So whoever's first in points is going to start in the back. So Dale Earnhardt starts last, due to the fact that he is the points leader. Actually, no, Mark, I think we got that wrong. I think it's set up inverted from the last race's results.
Oh, so well, yeah, but technically that would still be the
It
same
would
for
still
this
be the
race,
points.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because where they
Just just
finished.
just for clarification, everyone, every IROC race in the history of the world was set up by the last race's results inverted. So Dale Earnhardt's going to start in the back, and then he's going to have little Al right next to him. And then Danny Sullivan and Bobby Rahal are going to be starting on the pole, front row positions because they did not fare too well at Talladega.
Which is understandable considering, they don't really race in a series where you'd go to a track like Talladega. And the race only 30 laps. So it's a very short race on a short road course at an airport. That's the cool. So this Cleveland track, we haven't really said, it's an airport. So they set up a bunch of barriers and invent a track. And IndyCar and kart, they raced there for years. And a lot of fans I see recently on Twitter are like, they got to bring Cleveland back. And I'm like, maybe. I've never watched a kart race there, but like this race isn't like the most interesting race in the world, but it is a cool racetrack and it's a cool idea, this whole airport thing. So, it's cool. Like there's really only one place you can pass. And it's kind of like a paperclip sort of deal. Like it's very small the way it's laid out, but it's an interesting track. It's different. And different is a lot of the times good. So
Yeah, and the thing is too, it's a very nice backdrop. You had to say, like the water that's off to the back straightaway, and then you got the city in the distance with the skyline. It's kind of an interesting looking setup for a track.
So going into the race, they're gonna, like as we said, Danny Sullivan, Bobby Rahal are gonna lead the field down the front straightaway, and immediately we go 5 wide into the first turn because everyone knows this is your one opportunity to pass. So we better get to the lead and stay there. And they go 5 wide in turn 1. They're beating on each other. It's amazing. I put the video on my Twitter like last week, and like people were just loving it. And then Rusty Wallace gets into Mark Martin in I think the second turn because they're like 3 wide, and then he tries to turn in even more and smashes into the side of Mark Martin and spins out.
He's won here, and look at that, Rusty Wallace with a spin. He got into the side of another car. That was Mark Martin. Wallace with a complete 360, and he's back under power. No apparent serious damage to that machine.
So Rusty Wallace takes himself out of the race pretty much right away because there really aren't cautions in IROC. There are, but like definitely not on a road course. Like if you can get it going again, they'll just let you get it going again because there's so few cars, right? Like
classic local yellows, you know what I mean?
Exactly. So that was never going to stick, and he spins out, so he's out of the race pretty much, way behind. And then we get a new race leader on the first lap.
Yeah, and that race leader is the man of the hour, Mr. Emerson Fittipaldi. He's going to run and take the lead. And also, he looks so cool in the lead. He's got the all-black car, and he is just working it. Mark, you've mentioned it. He doesn't care that it's the racing surface or just the grass on the side of the track. He uses everything that the airport facility gives him to muscle his Dodge Daytona around and take the lead, a commanding lead too. He kind of walks away from the field for a little bit, but you got to look out for Mr. Martin Brundle. He's already up to third already on lap 2. He's motoring his way through the pack.
Yeah, he started 8th. He's already up to 30. He's chipping away on Emerson. But just watching them like between lap 2, lap 10, like the way that they're almost like drifting the cars around the corners, like the rear end stepping out on them. Like it's just, even though there's not a lot of close racing, like it's just so cool to watch these absolute like monster race car drivers driving these like, dinky Dodge Daytonas and like beating the crap out of them and driving them like hell because they're not theirs. They don't have to fix them after the race. They're giving her all she's got, and you only have to go 30 laps. So, I can use up my tires. I can use up my brakes. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. These guys know exactly what they need to be doing to get themselves in a great position. And like you said, I mean, it's not close side by side racing, but I mean, when you're looking at the field as they come down the front straightaway, you just see a Congo line of rainbow, it like every different color you can imagine, one after another, bumper to bumper, all trying to get the most they can out of the car. And if you make one mistake, someone's going to pass you, and it's probably going to be a freight train of other cars that pass you too. Except for, of course, the leaders who are kind of in a little bit of a league of their own. They're really stepping away from the field here.
And on lap 12, Martin Brundle is just going to outbrake Emerson Fittipaldi in turn 1. He's going to take the lead. And kind of a spoiler alert, it's a lead he's not going to relinquish. He's going to lead the rest of the race. So
oh, yeah, no.
Emerson leads the first 11 laps. Martin Brundle is going to lead the last 19 laps. So not a lot really happens in this race. So Brundle outbreaks him. And then lap 13, we have a retirement.
Yeah, on lap 13, Mr. Danny Sullivan comes into the pits with some issues. In fact, he goes on to say it's some gearbox related issues, and he was not a happy man. He was not happy, even with talking with IROC series director Jason Norrie. He was not pleased because it's not fun when you get knocked out on lap 13 of the 30-lap race. But on lap 15, it's okay. Jack Aru's going to give us some insight with the mechanics of racing.
The efficiency and effectiveness of one's brakes can often dictate how a driver does in a race here at Cleveland. Here's why. This particular course requires that drivers get on and off the brakes as often as once every 7 or 8 seconds. Now, that amount of brake usage ends up producing rotor temperatures as high as 800 degrees. Now, as a rotor temperature goes up, the effectiveness of the brakes goes down. So in order to provide a sufficient amount of brakes for each driver to complete the race here, the folks at IROC have developed a twofold system. Here's how it starts out. On the nose of the car, they've taken some ductwork and they force air back through this inlet through a rubber hose that runs directly back to the brake rotor itself. Now, that air forcing itself down onto the rotor is fairly effective, but not effective enough. So what they've added is the second stage to the system, and that consists of introducing water to that air. Now, this tank is filled with water prior to the start of the race. On each of the brake pedal assemblies in these Dodge Daytonas is a solenoid switch, which is activated every time the brake pedal is depressed. That sends an electronic signal to this little motor here, which in turn pumps water through this rubber hose into the brake duct system itself. Now, when we take it apart, you can see a small spray nozzle that's located in each of the brake ducts. That produces a fine mist of water, which is then mixed with that air and forced back to the brake rotor system. It provides a very effective method of keeping the brakes cool and very efficient.
That was a nice segment, Mark.
It was, and that'll brighten Danny Sullivan's day,
Exactly. He gave a little bit of love to Danny Sullivan, even though he can't win this race. Moving forward, though, on lap 21, this is probably the biggest incident of the race. Dorsey Schrader, while running in third, right on the bumper of Emerson Fittipaldi, Emerson dips his tires off the track a little bit on the last corner, and Dorsey gets some sand and dirt underneath the tires, and around the back of his Dodge Daytona goes, makes contact with the outside wall, and unfortunately, that's going to cause him to retire. But, Jack Aru, props to him for getting in there. He gets into the window net, asks Dorsey what's going on, and Dorsey, being the professional he has always been, gives him the scoop. And you know what? Props to those two guys for that, because, it's really cool. It adds more level and insights to the fans. And in fact, NBC, if you want to step up your game, stop doing the whole gimbal man gib at the end of the race where you talk to the driver on front straightaway. Why don't you get someone over the wall during a pit stop to ask the driver a question? Reach a microphone to the window net and let's get the scoop. You know what I mean?
Talk to drivers during the race. Call them up on the radio during the race and find out what's going on. I remember Carl Edwards always used to joke. He's like, if you guys want to call me in the middle of the race, go for it. Like, I don't mind.
Yeah. And ESPN was like the best with the whole in-race reporter because they would like really pick someone. And I think it's because of a guy like Carl Edwards who was always so personable and willing to talk and engage throughout the race. Nowadays, I think they screw the pooch on it a bit. They wait either till like 2 to go to do it, or they just don't really find the right time to communicate with the driver, whether they're just involved in an incident or what. But I mean, it's as long as they're not going to rip the mic out of your hand like Rusty Wallace did to Mr. Glenn Jarrett at Phoenix in 1990.
And on lap 29, we get a pass. Al Unser Jr. is going to get around Emerson Fittipaldi for second place. Fittipaldi just, he says later he just kind of used his stuff up. Used up his tires, used up his brakes, trying to fight off Martin Brundle. So little Al's going to get around him, and Martin Brundle wins. What is this race called? The Cleveland IROC 1990 Race 2 at Cleveland. So Martin Brundle is your winner. It would be his only career IROC win, and kind of a really cool feather in his cap. As a F1 guy, he can always have that time. He never won an F1 race, but he can always talk about how the time he won that IROC race at the Cleveland airport.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely the highlight of his career. That Le Mans win, nothing.
Yeah. I mean,
IROC race at Cleveland. If you could only save one trophy in your burning house, I'm saving my Cleveland IROC trophy. All right.
Yeah, especially
I'd be Dale Earnhardt and Emerson Fittipaldi. Come on.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at the stacked names behind him. So let's go through a race rundown here of the course. We're going to go through the top 11 because Mr. 12th place Darrell Waltrip was not in the race. So of course Martin Brundle wins it. Al Unser Jr. second. Emerson Fittipaldi comes home third. Terry Labonte, he's a road course master in NASCAR himself, comes home fourth. Dale Earnhardt with the top 5 coming home in fifth. Mark Martin comes home sixth. Jeff Bratham comes home seventh. Rusty Wallace eighth. Bobby Rahal in ninth. Dorsey Schrader in 10th. And of course, Danny Sullivan rounding out the field in 11th. So, I mean, that's a pretty stacked field to go against. And, you beat some of the best names in the world. Even though, yeah, there was only 2 lead changes, the race was probably 42 minutes long and had an average speed about 101 miles an hour. So still a quick pace race, but I think, Mark, you said it best, how much these drivers had to use these cars up just to get around this track. They really manipulated the car, used every bit of the airport facility, not just the racing surface. They were everywhere, just trying to manhandle these Dodge Daytonas around the Cleveland airport.
Yeah, and that's what makes it a really cool race. That's just watching these guys just give it all because they all want to win. This is all friendly competition. They all want to win, beat each other. I don't know how much they really all care about the $175,000 for the championship because they're all millionaire race car drivers. But maybe not Dorsey Schrader driving a Trans Am, but all the rest of them are millionaire race car drivers. But
back then, it's to your greatest national export, Mr. Ron Fellows, who was a great Trans Am driver. I mean, him and Dorsey drove in a time when Trans Am had so much factory funding behind it, from Chevrolet, Camaro, with Mustang and their Ford and their Mustang, and a few other manufacturers I just can't really think off the top of my head. But there was a lot of money involved in it to be yes, we're going to be the best of the best, and our brand is going to be the best. So here's some money, and unfortunately, it's not like that anymore. But at least we got Dorsey Schrader out of it. And Ron Fellows.
A lot of good drivers in Trans Am back then. But post-race notes, Martin Brundle takes the point lead. So Martin Brundle is now the leader in the IROC points. He leads Dale Earnhardt and Al Unser Jr., who are tied for second place by 2 points. Now, naturally, history will show that Dale Earnhardt is going to go on and win the IROC championship that year, as he won races at Talladega and Michigan and finished 5th at Cleveland. So plenty of, just dominance. In fact, at the Michigan race, he led all 50 laps. So
yeah,
he'll dominate the season and be the 1990 IROC champion. And that leads us to, well, not our favorite segment. Our favorite segment is training starters, but we didn't have that because it's IROC. So
yeah,
but we need to rate the race.
All right, so you know how we rate them. We go in and we look at a scale of 1 to 10 what our assessment of this race is. So Mark, I'll let you go first. Scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate this race?
7 out of 10.
7. All right, expand on that a little bit for us.
So I give this race a 7 out of 10. First off, there was only 1 lead change and no passing. So that is definitely a negative. But the nostalgic value of the fact that it's IROC. The cars are really cool. There's some really cool driving. You get awesome foot cam of Martin Brundle's feet heel toe in the clutch and the brake, which is amazing. Great production values. You got Paul Page and Bobby Unser. And it's an IROC race that a NASCAR guy doesn't win. So that's pretty cool. The fact that Martin Brundle won is really cool. That kind of bumped it up for me. It's really like a 5. Like it's not a great race. It's a really like kind of lame kind of racetrack for this sort of car. You know, maybe for IndyCar it's better. I've never watched one, so I can't really judge it. But I give it a 7 just because it's just for its place in history. I give it a 7 out of 10.
It's not a bad one. I got to give it 7.5. I'd want to go 8 on it because Paul Page just doing his Paul Page amazingness and just talking up how great IROC is, because it's not just IROC, it's the IROC. Okay, that's crazy with Paul, but 7.5. I always love these kinds of broadcasts from ABC with the IROC coverage. It was always entertaining and fun to me, and it's a good amount of content. For about an hour of your time, you get a good amount of racing in there. Plus, they throw in some pretty good side notes where Jackaroo does, he does a nice sit-down piece with Emerson Fittipaldi during the broadcast. There's the Jackaroo segment where he goes and showcases some people that work within IROC and some of the technology that IROC does like implement to kind of enhance the racing. So to me, it does add a little bit to it. And it's just quality content. It's really great to learn about the different drivers that were racing in the world, because this is like the kind of thing you watch and then you're like, oh, Martin Brundle, who is that? And then now you go down this rabbit hole of looking up old IMSA races that Martin was in, or you look up Emerson Fittipaldi's 1989 kart career and what he did to get invited to the IROC. Or if you're really going to go down a rabbit hole, you're going to go look up his F1 stuff and try to find old F1 coverage or just read things about it. So that's why I really like IROC races to me, Mark. It's like a gateway to start going down different rabbit holes and learning about different things, whether it's drivers, sponsors, manufacturers, what have you. It's just a great racing reference.
Yeah, and I did exactly that for when we were researching this episode. Like, I ended up reading a lot about Martin Brundle and a bunch of the other stuff that he did, and it's just cool, man. It was a cool thing in time. I'm really glad it existed. I'm not on the let's bring it back train, but I think it's cool that it existed and it's an awesome part of history. So I give it a 7. James gives it a 7.5. So that would give it an average of 7.25 out of 10 on our scale. It is December 22nd, so it's almost Christmas time. So we could have been more generous, I guess. But I'm not gonna just give it more points just because it's Christmas. But I'll try and get this episode up hopefully before Christmas. I think we're still waiting for the last one to process. I've been putting all the episodes on YouTube though, so I'm going to start putting them all on YouTube because then people can just watch. If you listen on a desktop, it's really easy to just go on YouTube and click play. So it's kind of cool.
It's easier than just saying, "Oh, download Spotify." A lot of people probably don't listen to Spotify. There obviously are a lot on the platform, but I think it's more or less just a good way if we can do this. And I'm pretty sure people in the future, they want to probably look us up on the web and find a website that we could have probably maybe articles, other pieces of content on there, and maybe some pictures that flash back to the track, either from us or other people that we've spoken to, and some of the interviews that we have, kind of been planning in the works for a little bit.
And on that note, I did record an interview with a former Grand Am racing driver and a friend of mine, Mark Wilkins, the other day, and we're going to put that interview up kind of as a sort of interesting deal where he talks about his Grand Am times as a separate episode. And we're hoping we can do a lot more of those types of short interviews where a driver talks about a period in the racing career, maybe a time they were a strange starter. If we talk to a road course guy who ran a NASCAR race, stuff like that. And we're hoping we can do more of that. We're really hoping that this season, when we're out at our job around the racetrack, that maybe we can meet a few people who'd be interested in having a chat with us just for fun, because we like doing it. And hopefully that can grow a little bit as well. So that'll be a separate episode, and hopefully there'll be many more of those to come.
Hopefully, and in the future, we got a lot more planned. Next week, we're going to have another awesome podcast going for you. Could be a movie, could be a race. We don't know. We actually might double up because, it's the off season. We might have a little more time within the next 2 weeks before we have to really get back going with our jobs and kind of some of the other things we got going on.
Exactly. So that being said, this has been Foster to the Track. I believe this is episode 17. I think.
17. Yeah.
17. So episode 17. Thanks for listening, everyone, and a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, happy Hanukkah, happy non-denominational gift-giving day, whatever you celebrate. Have fun with your family. Alcohol is a good way to get through it if you don't get along with your family. So,
and if not, there's
enjoy
always
yourselves.
some green stuff you can find. I don't know where. Just find it. But yeah, have fun, enjoy your holidays, and we'll see you next time.